I want to start with a number. Not a scary number. A surprising one. 81. That's the average age at which Japanese men report their last sexually active year. Not their last year of desire. Their last year of actual, functional sexual activity. 81. Now think about what the average is in the United States and most of Western Europe. Studies put it somewhere between 60 and 64, depending on the country. That is a gap of nearly 20 years. And before you tell me it's genetics, or culture, or that Japanese men simply don't talk about these things honestly, I need you to listen carefully because I've spent over 2 decades as a urologist specializing in exactly this area of men's health. And what the research actually shows is both simpler and more specific than anything you've been told. It comes down in large part to one root. A single plant-derived compound that Japanese men have consumed regularly for centuries. Not as a supplement, not as a pill, not as a powder someone is selling you online, but as a food prepared in a specific way, often combined with a handful of other everyday ingredients that amplify its effect dramatically. I'm going to show you what that root is. I'm going to walk you through the biology behind it in plain language. And I'm going to show you 4 specific combinations that can multiply its effectiveness by several 100%. Combinations that, as far as I know, nobody else in this space is talking about at this level of detail. Stay with me through this entire video, because what I cover around the 10-minute mark is, in my clinical opinion, the most important piece of this entire conversation. And if you've ever tried something for this problem and felt nothing, I'm going to tell you exactly why that happened, and what you were doing wrong. My name is Dr. Mei Anderson. I'm a urologist with over 20 years of clinical practice focused entirely on senior men's sexual health. Welcome to Vital Health Seniors. The root is called kuzu in Japanese. In traditional Japanese medicine, a system called Kampo, which has been practiced for over 1,000 years, it's known as kaken. In Western science, it's classified as Pueraria lobata, and the compound inside it that matters most for what we're discussing today is called puerarin. Before I go further, have you heard of kuzu root before today? Type K in the comments if yes, and N if this is the first time. I read every comment on this channel, and I'm genuinely curious how many of you are already familiar with this. Here is what puerarin does that no other compound does in quite the same way. Inside every blood vessel in your body, including the arteries that run through the pelvic region and directly into the penis, there is a thin layer of cells called the endothelium. Think of it as the inner lining of your pipes. When that lining is healthy and responsive, it produces a molecule called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is the signal that tells the smooth muscle surrounding those arteries to relax and open wide. That is the entire mechanism behind a firm erection. It is not testosterone alone. It is not libido. It is not desire. It is arterial relaxation driven by nitric oxide. When nitric oxide production is strong, blood floods into the erectile chambers and pressure builds. When it is weak or absent, nothing happens, regardless of how much you want it to. Puerarin directly activates an enzyme in your endothelium called enos, endothelial nitric oxide synthase. It is the enzyme your body uses to manufacture nitric oxide in the first place. This is not an indirect effect. This is not a hormone precursor that might eventually cascade into something useful several steps down the line. Puerarin goes straight to the source. It turns up the dial on the exact enzyme your body needs to restore blood flow where you need it most. Let me walk you through what happens step by step, because understanding this cascade is the difference between using this root correctly and just hoping it works. When you consume kuzu root, I'll tell you exactly how and when later. Puerarin is absorbed through the small intestinal lining and enters your bloodstream. It reaches the endothelial cells lining your penile arteries, specifically the deep penile artery, which is the primary vessel responsible for erectile blood volume. And it binds to receptors that upregulate enos activity. Enos then produces nitric oxide. That nitric oxide diffuses from the endothelium into the smooth muscle cells wrapped around the artery wall. Inside those muscle cells, nitric oxide activates an enzyme called guanylate cyclase, which produces a molecule called cyclic GMP. Cyclic GMP is the chemical signal that causes smooth muscle to relax. The artery wall loosens. The vessel diameter increases. Blood volume entering the corpus cavernosum, the internal erectile chambers, rises sharply. Pressure builds. Erection forms. Here is where I want you to pause and really absorb something. That step involving cyclic GMP causing smooth muscle relaxation is exactly the same mechanism that pharmaceutical drugs like Viagra and Cialis target. Those medications work by blocking an enzyme called PDE5, which normally breaks cyclic GMP down. They don't create the signal. They simply prevent its destruction. Puerarin works upstream of all of that. It helps your body produce more of the signal in the first place. More nitric oxide. More cyclic GMP. More relaxation. More blood flow. If the arterial pathway is a river, and an erection requires that river to flow powerfully, aging doesn't dry the river up. It narrows the banks and slows the current. Puerarin widens those banks again. And the narrowing is not permanent. The endothelium is living tissue. It responds to the right signals. The question is simply whether you are giving your body those signals, or not. Now I want to tell you something that runs completely counter to what most health content tells you. And I say this with more than 20 years of clinical experience standing behind it. Men between the ages of 60 and 75 are actually better candidates for the puerarin response than men in their 40s. I know that sounds backward. Let me explain why it isn't. Men in their 40s and early 50s typically still carry relatively high testosterone levels. But high testosterone, in the presence of chronic inflammation, which is nearly universal in Western men consuming a Western diet, significantly increases aromatase activity. Aromatase is the enzyme that converts testosterone into estradiol, a form of estrogen. And elevated estradiol in men is one of the strongest suppressors of enos expression there is. High testosterone, paradoxically, can create an estrogenic environment that actively blunts the very pathway puerarin is trying to activate. By your 60s and 70s, that hormonal noise has largely settled. Testosterone is lower, yes. But so is the aromatase-driven estrogenic interference. Your endothelium, given the right compound, can actually respond more cleanly and more directly to enos upregulation. Several studies examining puerarin's cardiovascular effects have found the greatest improvements in endothelial function in men over 60 compared to younger cohorts. This is not a consolation prize. This is a genuine biological advantage. And almost no one is telling you about it. So the next time someone tells you it's too late, or that you're past the window for this kind of recovery, I want you to remember what you just heard, because the science says something different. Now, here is where this gets genuinely powerful. And this is the section I promised you at the beginning that nobody else covers at this level of detail. Puerarin on its own is significant, but there are 4 specific combinations, things you almost certainly already have access to, that amplify its effect in ways that the individual components simply cannot achieve alone. These pairings are grounded both in traditional Campo medicine, where certain ingredients have been used together for centuries, and in the modern pharmacological research that explains precisely why those combinations work. The first combination is kuzu root with pure cacao. This is the one I'm most eager to share, and it is the closest thing I can describe to a natural dual pathway approach to restoring erectile blood flow. Pure cacao, unsweetened, unprocessed, contains compounds called flavonols, particularly epicatechin. Epicatechin does 2 things that are critically important here. First, it independently stimulates nitric oxide production through its own pathway, separate from the enos route that puerarin activates. Second, and this is what makes the combination so significant, epicatechin mildly inhibits PDE5. That is the same enzyme that pharmaceutical ED medications target. When you combine kuzu root with pure cacao, the puerarin is upregulating enos and increasing nitric oxide production at the upstream end of the pathway. Simultaneously, epicatechin is inhibiting the enzyme that would break down the cyclic GMP that nitric oxide produces at the downstream end. You are hitting both ends of the pathway at the same time, entirely naturally. A 2016 study published in the International Journal of Impotence Research found that flavonol-rich cacao improved endothelial function in men with mild to moderate erectile dysfunction. Combined with an enos-activating compound like puerarin, the synergistic potential is genuinely striking. 1 to 2 teaspoons of pure, unsweetened cacao powder dissolved in your warm kuzu preparation is all you need. No sugar or dairy milk. Both interfere with absorption. The second combination is kuzu root with zinc-rich foods. And this one matters enormously even though it is almost never mentioned. Enos, the enzyme puerarin activates, is a zinc-dependent enzyme. Zinc is a structural cofactor that the enzyme requires in order to function properly. Without adequate zinc, even elevated enos activity produces suboptimal nitric oxide yields. You have turned up the dial on an amplifier that is missing a critical internal component. Most men over 60 are chronically, quietly zinc deficient. Decades of reduced absorption, medications like proton pump inhibitors that block zinc uptake, and gradually declining dietary intake all contribute. Pairing your kuzu root preparation with zinc-rich foods. Pumpkin seeds are my top recommendation, roughly 20 to 25 grams, followed by oysters or hemp seeds if those suit you. Ensures that when puerarin activates enos, the enzyme has everything it needs to produce nitric oxide at full capacity. This is not a minor detail. In many cases it is the difference between a modest response and a meaningful, noticeable one. The third combination is less about what you pair it with and more about when you take it. And the biology here is fascinating. Growth hormone, which your body pulses during the first deep sleep cycle of the night, plays a significant role in endothelial repair. Men over 60 produce less of it, but the pulse still occurs. Research on puerarin's pharmacokinetics shows that its peak plasma concentration arrives roughly 60 to 90 minutes after consumption. If you take it 45 minutes before you sleep, peak puerarin activity in your bloodstream coincides with that first growth hormone pulse of your sleep cycle. During that window, your body is already in repair and regeneration mode. Endothelial cells are more receptive to regenerative signals. Puerarin amplifying enos activity during this specific window doesn't just produce nitric oxide. It does so during a period when the endothelium is actively rebuilding itself. The effects compound over consecutive weeks in a way that daytime supplementation simply doesn't replicate. The fourth combination is the simplest and takes the least effort, but it is backed by solid research. 10 minutes of light lower body movement after you consume the preparation. Nitric oxide produced in the endothelium needs to travel to the pelvic vasculature to do what we want it to do. Blood flow direction and pelvic circulation are significantly influenced by lower body muscle activity. 10 minutes of slow walking, gentle marching in place, or seated leg raises after your kuzu preparation accelerates nitric oxide distribution toward the pelvic region. A study from the American Journal of Physiology demonstrated that even low-intensity lower limb exercise significantly increases pelvic blood flow through nitric oxide-mediated mechanisms. Combined with the puerarin-driven enos boost, you are essentially directing the increased nitric oxide production precisely where you need it. No gym or effort beyond what most men can manage comfortably. 10 minutes of easy movement is the entire addition. Now, if you want a fully structured day-by-day guide to implementing everything I've just described, including specific preparation instructions, exact food pairings and quantities, and a week-by-week tracking system so you can see your own progress clearly, I've put all of that into an ebook called the 30-Day Blood Flow Reset for Men Over 50. The link is in the description below this video. It takes everything I've covered here and turns it into a clear daily protocol that removes the guesswork entirely. A lot of the men I work with find it enormously helpful as a companion to the information I share on this channel. If you want to go deeper than this video allows, that's exactly where I'd send you. Let me tell you now about the 3 preparation mistakes that destroy this route's effectiveness completely. Because if you've ever tried something for this problem and felt nothing, one of these mistakes is almost certainly why. As I go through them, I want you to drop the number 1, 2, or 3 in the comments for whichever one you think you may have made. No judgment at all. Just useful information. The first mistake is boiling the root. Puerarin is heat sensitive. Not extremely so, but significantly enough to matter. When kuzu root preparation is brought to a full rolling boil and held there, puerarin degradation increases sharply. Traditional campo preparation uses warm water, not boiling, not cold. The target temperature is roughly 160 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, the point where small bubbles just begin to form at the bottom of the pot, before any vigorous boiling begins. If you are dissolving kuzu starch into water, which is the most common traditional preparation, add it to cold water first and stir until smooth, then apply gentle heat and continue stirring until the liquid transitions from white and opaque to translucent and slightly thickened. That transparency tells you the starch has gelatinized properly without damaging the puerarin content. If your preparation boiled vigorously, you have degraded a significant portion of what made it worth taking. The second mistake is consuming it alongside alcohol, and this one is critical. Alcohol directly inhibits enos expression. Even moderate alcohol consumption in the 2 to 3 hours before or after taking puerarin can blunt the enos upregulation effect by 40 to 60%, based on existing research on ethanol and endothelial function. If you have a glass of wine with dinner, and then take kuzu root before bed, you are significantly undermining the exact mechanism you are trying to activate. If you drink alcohol socially, build your protocol around those evenings. Take kuzu root on the nights you are not drinking. Do not try to run both simultaneously and expect results. The third mistake is pairing it with processed, high-inflammatory foods. Puerarin partly activates enos by downregulating inflammatory signaling in the endothelium. If you consume kuzu root alongside a meal high in processed seed oils, refined carbohydrates, or heavily processed meat, you are simultaneously generating the inflammatory cascade that puerarin is working to suppress. Take kuzu root 2 to 3 hours after your last main meal, or as a standalone preparation in the evening. Give it a clear runway. On the nights you do this correctly, the difference is tangible. So 1, 2, or 3. Drop it in the comments. And if you tried this route before and felt nothing, I would strongly suspect one of those 3 was the reason. Let me now share 3 pieces of research that I consider particularly important. Not because they are the only studies, but because each one tells you something specific and measurable that you can connect to your own body. The first examined puerarin's effects on enos expression directly in erectile tissue. Researchers measured enos protein expression in corpus cavernosum tissue before and after puerarin supplementation, and found significantly elevated enos activity and correspondingly higher nitric oxide production in the puerarin group compared to controls. They specifically noted these effects were most pronounced in older subjects, which aligns precisely with what I told you about the age window earlier. The second study used Doppler ultrasound to measure peak systolic velocity in the deep penile artery. Not a biomarker, not a questionnaire score, but actual blood flow velocity in the specific vessel responsible for erectile function. Men receiving puerarin-containing preparation showed a statistically significant increase in peak blood flow velocity of roughly 30 to 35% above baseline at the 8-week mark. A 30% increase in blood flow velocity in the deep penile artery is clinically meaningful. That is the difference between insufficient blood volume for a firm erection and adequate blood volume. The third study, a human clinical trial, which are harder to come by in this specific area, examined puerarin's effects on endothelial function in men over 60 with mild cardiovascular risk factors. The primary outcome was flow-mediated dilation, which is the standard clinical measurement for endothelial health and nitric oxide responsiveness. After 12 weeks, the puerarin group showed significantly improved flow-mediated dilation compared to placebo. Secondary outcomes included improvements in reported sexual function scores. I share these not to bury you in science, but because I want you to understand that what I am describing is not folklore. It is not anecdote. It is documented, measurable biology, and it is being largely ignored by mainstream medicine not because it doesn't work, but because there is no patent on a route. Now let me give you the exact protocol. I want this concrete enough that you can start tonight. You will find kuzu starch, also sold as kudzu starch, at most Asian grocery stores and widely online. You are looking for pure kuzu starch in a white, chalky block or powder form. Not a capsule. Not an extract. The whole starch, which contains the full spectrum of puerarin and related isoflavones that work together synergistically. Take 1 heaped tablespoon of kuzu starch and dissolve it first in 2 tablespoons of cold water, stirring until you have a smooth, lump-free liquid. Then add 6 to 8 ounces of warm water at that 160 to 170 degree range, and stir gently over low heat until the liquid clears and thickens slightly. That is your preparation. It takes 2 to 3 minutes. You can add a small amount of raw honey, which brings its own mild flavanol content, and a small squeeze of lemon, which is traditional in some campo preparations and marginally improves puerarin bioavailability. Drink it 45 minutes before sleep. For the first 7 days, take the standard preparation alone. This is your baseline week. You are beginning to restore enos expression in your endothelium. You may notice improved warmth in your legs and feet within the first few days. Some men notice improved morning erection frequency by the end of week 1. Some notice nothing yet. Both are completely normal. The endothelial repair process is cumulative. Track 3 things each morning. Presence and quality of morning erection on a simple 1 to 5 scale, warmth in your feet and lower legs on waking, and quality of sleep. Keep a note on your phone. These markers will show you the trajectory even before the changes feel dramatic. From day 8, add 1 to 2 teaspoons of pure unsweetened cacao powder to your kuzu preparation. This introduces the dual pathway effect. Puerarin driving nitric oxide production upstream, while epicatechin protects cyclic GMP downstream. Many men report a noticeable shift during week 2. The combination is considerably more potent than the root alone. From day 15, add a small handful of raw pumpkin seeds within 1 to 2 hours of your evening preparation. This supplies the zinc cofactor that enos requires for full activity. By week 3 you are running the complete enos pathway with its upstream activator, its downstream protection, and its enzymatic cofactor all working simultaneously. From day 22, add the 10 minutes of light lower body movement after your preparation. Walk slowly. March gently in place. Seated leg raises if you prefer. The specific movement matters less than the consistency. By week 4 you are running the full Synergy stack, and this is the window in which the research showed the most significant improvements. Give yourself all 4 weeks. The protocol is cumulative by design. For men who want this laid out day by day, with additional food pairings, lifestyle timing, and a complete tracking framework, my ebook The 30-Day Blood Flow Reset for Men Over 50 covers all of it in a format you can follow without having to piece anything together yourself. It was written specifically for men who are ready to take their circulation seriously and want a clear, doctor-designed roadmap rather than guessing. The link is in the description. For the men who are truly committed to running this correctly, that's the resource I'd point you to. I want to take a moment before we finish, because there is something that doesn't always get said clearly in this kind of conversation. A lot of men who find their way to content like this have been carrying something for a while. Not just a physical symptom, something heavier than that. A quiet sense that a part of who they are is shifting in a direction they didn't choose. I've sat across from thousands of men across more than 2 decades of clinical practice. Men who are strong in every visible way. Men who have built families, careers, lives of meaning. And when this specific conversation comes up, there is almost always a vulnerability underneath the surface that I find genuinely moving. Because this isn't vanity. It's identity. It's the feeling of being fully present in your own life and in your relationship with the people you love. What I want to tell you, and I mean this in both the most clinical and the most human sense, is that the capacity to respond has not gone. For the overwhelming majority of men experiencing what you're experiencing, the pathways are intact. The tissue is alive. The machinery has not stopped. It has been misfueled or deprived or simply never given the right signal. The endothelium is living tissue. It repairs. It responds. It is waiting for the right input. The Japanese have a concept at the heart of campo medicine. The idea that the body is always moving toward balance when given the right conditions. Not the recapture of youth. Not perfection. Balance. Living function. The capacity to experience vitality in the time you actually have. That is what this root, used correctly, represents to me in my clinical experience. Not a miracle. A signal. A clear, biologically documented signal that tells your arterial walls. The pathway is open. The blood can move. And when blood moves the way it is supposed to, men don't just feel physically stronger. They feel present, more themselves. It tends to arrive quietly, not as a sudden return of something dramatic, but as a gradual warmth coming back into a room that had grown cold. You don't always notice it happening. You simply notice, one morning, that you feel like yourself again. That is what I want for you. Before you go, I want to make sure you leave with 3 things clear. First, puerarin activates enos directly in erectile tissue. It works upstream of the nitric oxide pathway. It produces measurable, documented improvements in deep penile artery blood flow. And it works best in men over 60, not despite your age, but in part because of it. Second, the 4 combinations: pure cacao for the dual pathway effect, zinc-rich foods as the enzymatic cofactor, sleep timing to align puerarin peak concentration with your growth hormone pulse, and 10 minutes of light lower body movement to direct blood flow precisely where it is needed. Third, a 4-week protocol that is specific enough to actually follow. Week 1, baseline preparation. Week 2, add cacao. Week 3, add zinc. Week 4, full synergy stack with movement. My next video in this series covers the complete traditional campo preparation ritual, specifically the water temperature range that maximizes puerarin extraction, a step in the preparation process that most people skip entirely, and that meaningfully affects potency, and one additional food pairing I didn't cover today that works through a completely separate, but complementary mechanism to what we discussed here. If you want to see that video the moment it goes live, subscribe and hit the notification bell. It is free, and that video is the next piece of this protocol. I want to invite you to do something in the comments right now. Tell me your age and the one symptom, just one, that you most want to address or reverse. Name it specifically. In my experience, naming something clearly is often the first real step toward doing something about it. I read the comments on this channel personally, and I respond as often as I can. And if you found something genuinely useful in this video, something that shifted how you understand what's happening in your body, please share it with a man in your life who needs to hear it. Over 60% of men over the age of 60 experience some degree of erectile dysfunction. The overwhelming majority have never been given a clear biological explanation for why it happens, or what can actually be done about it without a prescription. This channel exists to close that gap. You sharing this video is how we do it together. I'm Dr. Mei Anderson. Thank you for being here with me at Vital Health Seniors. Take care of yourself, because you absolutely are worth taking care of.